And as the late, great Jackie Gleason would say, and away we go. You are live having a nooner with me, Dave LaMont, on this Friday the 29th. And today we've got a few things to talk about before I bring in my guest to talk about a sudden pipeline that's developed between the city of Orlando and Knoxville, Tennessee. But a couple things that I wanted to get out of the way first. If you notice that all of the talk going into this big Super Bowl with the older quarterback who might probably the greatest of all time and the younger quarterback who might be the greatest of all time down the road, and all we're talking about is a guy who didn't play a playoff game in Deshaun Watson and where he might be traded to, whether it's New York or South Florida, will the Patriots get involved somehow? That would really bother some people. Is he going to go to the Rams and they're going to get rid of Jared Goff? And then where does Jared Goff go? That's the talk. So this Super Bowl right now, strangely enough, is not getting a lot of attention. That should change next week. But with the odd circumstances this year, I wonder if the media days will be as goofy and as frenzied. It's a fabulous matchup. I look forward to talking about it more next week. I'm very happy with the game. I hope you are too. I love watching both these quarterbacks, and I certainly enjoy watching both these teams play. The other big thing that really hijacked sports conversation and is still kind of going on, and I wanted to talk about it for a couple of minutes, was the Baseball Hall of Fame. And I had kind of God, I hate the word take, an opinion on this a couple of days ago when it went that nobody was elected. And then I listened to Dan Patrick, whom I greatly respect, and he had an interesting opinion, and it got me thinking that I kind of agreed with what Dan said. One of the things that Dan is just sick of the subject, and he pointed out that there's just no joy around not just the Hall of Fame announcement, but around baseball in general. And he's right. The Hall of Fame election should be a time where we look forward to honoring the finest players who ever played. Lately, unfortunately, starting last year and even into this year, we're losing these guys. You know, they're older people. You know, Hank Aaron most recently, and all the true Hall of Famers. I mean, 12.2% of the Hall of Fame has passed away in the last 12 months. Think of that. Genuinely great players. Nobody questioned one of their credentials. Not one. They were from an era where maybe there was a bowl of greenies in the clubhouse that people took, amphetamines to stay awake, and that was it. Now, because of the steroid era, which began with a Maguire-Sosa home run chase where baseball was kind of like cheerleading them on, hit them, boys, we need you. And then, of course, we got very self-righteous when they found that bottle of Andro in Maguire's locker. And we've been very self-righteous ever since. And then Barry Bonds went from about 175 pounds to 175-pound head while breaking Hank Aaron's home run record, or not, depending on how you feel. And other players tested positive. Other great players tested positive, besides Bonds, who was a damn fine player before he blew himself up. And he didn't get into the Hall of Fame again. Neither did Roger Clemens. Neither did Curt Schilling. Now, Schilling's circumstances are different. So all we're going to get this year in Cooperstown, and I hope it's in Cooperstown in July, will be the 2020 inauguration. So it's going to be a lot of Derek Jeter. That's fine. He's a worthy player. I have no problem with Derek Jeter being in the Hall of Fame. And I don't vote, by the way. And another thing has come out. The people who have decided not to vote in protest. Now, it is your right not to vote, I suppose, but I feel the same way about people who don't vote for halls of fame as elections. I don't really tolerate it. I haven't missed an election since I could start voting when I was 18 years old, and I will never miss one. I mean, elections for city council where I live, state elections, national elections. I bat 100%. It's important to me. So if I had the ability, and I vote on some college football honors, and I don't miss. I vote on the Bolitnikoff. I vote on the Lott Award. I vote on All-American awards. It matters to me, and I take it very seriously. And I do, especially the All-American stuff. But I'm looking at linemen that I don't even know that much about, and I will do my research to see if they are truly All-Americans or not, plus whatever players I'd seen. So when somebody's trying to make a political statement or a protest statement by not voting, it kind of leaves me a little sour. As for Curt Schilling, yes, some of the stuff he said most recently about what happened in Washington and beyond was after the deadline. And it's not just his political views that have hurt him, although I am certain those have. He only missed by 4%. You don't think maybe what he did to the state of Rhode Island, defrauding them out of $75 million, has something to do with it? Because if we're going to do character, and that's on the ballot, it's on the rules as character, I'm sorry, that hurts. Now you can make, if you just strict, the debate is now, is it going to be strictly baseball? But here's the thing, with a 5-year wait, there's plenty of time for you to screw up, as Schilling did, and plenty of time for you to build your case even better and be an ambassador for the game, which would help. So, but here we are not even talking about whether or not they were worthy as players. And the problem now is there's so much cynicism in baseball among the writers and among the fans. As soon as anybody has a good season, they're a cheater. Oh, you see that guy? Come on. And by the way, speaking of actual cheating, what do you do with the Houston Astro players who are going to be eligible for the Hall of Fame when they retire? The ones that did cheat blatantly and got caught. That'll be a fun debate in a few years, and that will suck more joy out of voting for the Hall of Fame, out of the Hall of Fame, out of the game. It's interesting. The football writers, I always felt, kind of protect the NFL, protect the shield. Baseball writers have no problem ripping their sport to shreds. They're kind of an old guard mentality, and I think they would be happy if the Dodgers went back to Brooklyn, some of them, and the Braves went back to Milwaukee. It's a weird mentality, and it's just my opinion. I don't have any facts. I didn't do a study on this. It's just an opinion. So we can't enjoy the Baseball Hall of Fame as much anymore. I do not. Now, I'll tell you this. Had I had a ballot, I would not have voted for Bonds. I would not have voted for Clemens. If you want to find Sammy Sosa's numbers, by the way, go down. He's getting like single digits, so he's never getting in. I wouldn't vote for them because I'm convinced they did cheat the game when you're not supposed to. And yes, I'm not interested in hearing that, well, it was 2004 when they finally got the rules in there, Dave. Yeah, I know. Doesn't matter. And Schilling, that's an interesting one because as a ball player, he's a borderline candidate. He was a stud in the postseason, 11-2, big money pitcher, bloody sock or painted with a crayon, whatever. He came through big when the Red Sox really needed him. He had a very solid career. But he wasn't a guy that you go, Tom Seaver, the late Bob Gibson, automatic. Don't even think about it. You didn't. Or more recently, Mariano Rivera, who, by the way, is politically conservative. That didn't hurt him. Didn't hurt George Brett that he's politically conservative. If you didn't vote for George Brett, you're stupid. So I admit it. Character should matter. Now, the other argument I always hear is, but Dave, look at the D-bags that are in there who were racist and sexist, and you're right. There were some truly awful people elected in there, but the standards were different then. And I'm not in favor of yanking guys out of the Hall of Fame, okay? That's not happening. O.J. Simpson went to prison and was accused of double murder, and a lot of people, me included, think he did it. He's still in the Football Hall of Fame and should be. Because but if somebody does that now, like Ray Caruth, although he was never that good of a player, ain't getting in the Hall of Fame. If you don't know that name, it's R-A-E Caruth. Look it up. So the fun out of baseball, you got everybody yelling at baseball, hurry up, make the game faster, make the game faster. I don't know how much faster you can make it. Maybe you just need to accept baseball for what it is. It's not meant to be played at absurd pace. It used to be, but television got it in. Once you throw television into it, and I ought to know, it complicates things and it slows things down. So either decide to enjoy baseball because they're trying everything they can to speed the sucker along, or find something else, okay? It's all right with me. So there's the fun of Hall of Fame announcements. Now we got the football one coming up, and I'll certainly have more on that as we get closer. And really hoping that Zach Thomas of the Dolphins gets in. He seems quite worthy to me, and we'll see what happens. There are a few always that are like, no problem. This guy's getting in. And let's hope that Zach Thomas is one of those guys. All right, I want to bring my guest on. And it's been interesting. We've talked a lot of college football around here, and I usually talk a lot about UM. And I've talked quite a bit about Florida State, but I haven't spent a lot of time on UCF. That is about to change with my guest here, Jeff Sharon from blackandgoldbanneret.com. And Jeff, I'll get right into it. You had a nice athletic director and a winning football coach, and they've gone to Knoxville to work at the University of Tennessee. How big of a shock to the system is this for UCF Nation?
Hey, Dave. Well, thanks for having me. It's I think the biggest shock was when Danny White, the athletic director, left for Tennessee. And I don't think I don't want to say it wasn't a surprise, but it was a shock because given his track record since 2015, how he really rescued UCF's athletic department from the smoldering rubble that was left behind by George O'Leary when he was both the head football coach and, but don't forget, interim athletic director for about 7 months in 2015, and then it all fell apart. And Danny White, in record time, rescued not just the football program by hiring Scott Frost initially, but also the rest of the athletic department as well. Made a bunch of really great coaching hires that panned out in a number of different sports. Johnny Dawkins for men's basketball, Katie Abrahamson-Henderson for women's basketball. They've had the best 4-year stretch in that program's history. Greg Lovelady, former UM catcher at baseball.
Love that man.
Yeah,
he's my guy.
We love Coach Loved up here. He's the best. Cindy Ball Malone is softball. Tennis, John Roddick, Andy Roddick's brother, was brought in as the director of tennis and men's tennis head coach. And the results on the field and on the court have been fantastic. And I think, once that happens, that other athletic departments are going to start sniffing around for him. And I think what Danny proved when he was at Buffalo prior to UCF and at UCF is that he's always up for a challenge. And boy, does he have a challenge in front of him in Knoxville.
Yeah, he does, because you think of that as a legacy university, and yet it has become, under Phil Fulmer, an absolute disaster. And a lot of people are blaming the fans for the dictation of the hiring of Jeremy Pruitt when they had Greg Schiano supposedly ready to sign a contract. He's got maybe as big a challenge as he had at Buffalo, which doesn't have 1/billionth of the money that they have at Tennessee or the facilities.
Yeah, I do see what you're saying, and I agree with you with what's going on up there in Tennessee. I think, or at least I would hope for their sake, that those fans understand that this is, if you want a reclamation project, you've got it. And I think Danny can pull it off. Although, one thing that I thought was interesting was the other day when, or was it yesterday, that when Josh Heupel, the head football coach, formerly of UCF, was introduced at Tennessee, it was interesting that Danny White said, I've only been a part of 2 leaks in my entire history as an athletic director, and they've both been me going to Tennessee and Josh Heupel going to Tennessee. So it is a different world up there. Yeah. I do think though that UCF fans are a little harder on their school than most outside of the UCF universe think. That said, as we both know, Tennessee and the SEC and that pressure cooker, it's a tough road for Danny White and Josh Heupel going forward. And the thing that's interesting about this is that they're both going to need some time because, like we said, that athletic department is a mess. And
that's the thing that fans don't have a lot of interest in is being patient and having time. And especially when you're at Tennessee and you have Rocky Top and you have the 103,000, eventually we'll get back to that at Neyland. And the other thing with the SEC, and I guess it's probably everywhere, but you're right about the SEC. It's either you're happy that you're winning, but you're unhappy that you're not winning enough, or you're just unhappy because you're not winning at all and you want to be where Alabama is. Good luck with that, by the way. Or, Florida, Georgia, in the case of football. But then again, you're right. Danny White in Buffalo, major challenge. And UCF was a major challenge because I remember talking with Scott Frost his first year there before he had the undefeated season. And I remember, would they go 5-6 that year? Right?
6 and 7. 6 and 7.
And I remember saying publicly, that's one of the greatest coaching jobs in recent college football history, was going from 0 wins to 6 wins. And he told me, he said, the biggest thing we had to do was to get guys to love playing football again. He said they were so beaten down by what had gone on. He said we didn't really raise our voices in practices. And Frost is a soft-spoken guy, for those who don't know him. He said we just had to get them to like playing football. Well, obviously he did, because you had the perfect season the next season. So when Danny White goes, was your next thought, well, there goes Heupel, or was that a surprise?
There were rumors about it almost immediately. I didn't believe them. I thought initially, based on Coach Heupel's buyout, which was pretty steep, even by UCF standards, I didn't think that would. I didn't think that Tennessee would go for it just right away, and B, I didn't think also that Tennessee's fan base would be overly enthusiastic about it. But again, that part of that comes from the fact that, here I am in the UCF bubble, right? Where a lot of the fans at UCF, when Josh Heupel left, and we've seen the reaction, not a lot of people are not thrilled about Josh Heupel leaving, to tell you the truth. And the players yesterday over the last 24 to 48 hours have expressed the fact that they're perfectly fine with Josh Heupel moving on. And it's funny what you were talking about before with SEC fans. It's Donnie Walsh said about Larry Brown that Larry Brown is only happy when he's unhappy.
The same thing is said about me, by the way.
I know that the same thing is you can definitely say about Tennessee fans and much of the SEC as well. They're only happy when they're unhappy. So, but when you have that $44 million check coming to you from ESPN every year, when you're an SEC school, UCF's buyout contracts are pocket change, basically, right, at that point. UCF fans saw the regression over 3 years with Heupel. You go from 12-1 and a Fiesta Bowl berth and losing by 1 score to LSU, to 10-3 and a bowl win, to 6-4 this year, and a loss to BYU in Boca. But I personally don't think that was really, I think you kind of have to throw this year out because of because of COVID and all the other situations that happened with, players opting out and whatnot. I don't think that it was as bad as people thought, but UCF fans, like I said, they're perfectly fine with Josh Heupel moving on, and the players seem to be too. And now the question becomes for the president, Alexander Cartwright. Now you got to hire your AD and your coach. Similar to what John Hitt had to do 5 years ago. And now you're doing it in late January, early February, which is much different from before, when it was 37 days between, I think it was Halloween when George O'Leary got fired, and then early December when Danny White hired Scott Frost. So he's going to have to move quick.
So what's the order going to be? I would assume that you get the AD first, but you have to act pretty quickly. We'll get into who might get the coaching job in a minute, but the AD job, not as sexy because those names aren't quite as recognizable, but anything you've heard about who the AD or the top candidates are?
Well, we haven't heard much smoke here, but there are a few candidates who are worth looking at for UCF. And you're right. I do think that they will hire the AD first, but I don't think there'll be a lot of lag time. There's certainly a possibility that it could be a package deal. As far as internal candidates, for UCF, Scott Carr, who's actually the interim AD right now, is going to be one of the people who internally I think a lot of people really do like. He's certainly ready to be an athletic director. He's been the associate AD for external services for quite a bit, and there are a bunch of other interesting candidates as well. Graham Neff, the associate AD from Clemson, has been one of the names that we've seen associated, just kind of fishing around, seeing what's going on. Brian White, the AD at Florida Atlantic. I'm not 100% sure that Brian would want to take the job at UCF and follow in his brother's footsteps. That's kind of a tough act to follow. And there have been a couple of other people who've actually, one interesting name that got floated out there was Maybe Eric Wood, who just left UCF for Louisiana Tech to become their AD, but I don't know if they would be able to get him back really quickly.
Right.
And a couple of names. Ren Baker for North Texas, I think, was another one. But the good thing is for UCF is they have their pick of the litter as far as ADs, because everyone knows the brand now, and everyone wants this job because of what you can do with it.
Right. And that's thanks to Danny White.
Yeah. It's tremendous thanks to Danny
White had so much to do with the branding, and it was all of that. Whether and you know this, and I know this, UCF pissed off a lot of people by taking that share of the national championship in football. But that was Danny White's idea, and it was really one of the finest marketing ideas in the history of college sports. And it threw UCF out there. Now, it left you vulnerable. And every time UCF loses something, the Twitter people come out. I've done it. I've stopped doing it because it isn't funny anymore, but I did it a couple times. The people, there goes that national championship. But it was brilliant. It really was brilliant. And that was Danny White's baby. And, that I got to give him credit. The more I look at it, it's kind of how I felt about Steve Spurrier. In the beginning, I didn't get him. Once I figured him out and I appreciated what he was doing, then I really ended up liking the guy a great deal for the entertainment value as much as everything else he did. So I think maybe it's just, you just need time to appreciate what Danny White did. The other thing is, and folks don't know this, again, I've been there many times. Obviously, this is your beat. UCF is a giant. People don't really realize this because they're fairly new in football, certainly not as old as FSU or Florida or Miami. But you've got a mess of students there. The campus seems to be growing. The football stadium probably could use a little refreshing around there, but you've got a good arena. You've got the facilities, and you've got a growing market there. So this isn't some Hicktown BS job that somebody would be stepping into either.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And the joke for years and years and years at UCF, going back when I was a student in the early 2000s, was UCF is the sleeping giant of college football. Because of all the things that you mentioned, large metropolitan area, it's a massive school in terms of enrollment. People forget UCF is up there with Texas and Arizona State in terms of total enrollment, the largest schools in the country, about 65,000 students. That's a lot of students. And that's also a lot of student athletic fees that get paid to the athletic department every year. That's the other thing, too. The on-campus stadium in 2007 was huge. There's just a lot to work with at UCF. And the thing that Danny White really did was he took advantage of those. He took advantage of those opportunities. And you hit it right on the head with the national championship claim, that it got kids in Idaho, right, looking at like, what's this UCF school in Orlando? It looks really cool. And I'll tell you, the most important thing, I think, from Danny White's entire tenure at UCF as the athletic director was getting ESPN College Game Day to come here in 2018, late in 2018, when they played Cincinnati at home, and getting ABC and your colleagues, Chris Fowler and Kirk Herbstreit, in there. And if you go back and watch that game on YouTube, the place is a madhouse. It's 45,000 students 45,000 people, 20,000 students who are going bonkers for 3.5 hours on national TV. And yeah, you could say, there's other places where that environment's pretty much the same, but it's just different at UCF because it's a much younger crowd. You got to remember, UCF only started football in 1978, joined Division 1A in 1996. That's not that long ago.
No.
And joined actually the first year they were actually in a conference was 2002. That's also not that long ago. So to see what UCF was able to do to get that national attention was really huge for the program. So the secret's out now. And now the big challenge is for whoever the next AD is what are you going to do to build on that brand? That's the thing. It's one thing to just keep the treadmill going. Right. It's another thing to say, okay, there are some places where I think we can improve on this, and here's where. That's a tough sell.
Yes, and one thing that could help is hiring a good football coach. And I was reading on your website this morning, which is blackandgoldbanneret.com. You had a long list of candidates. Let's start with Randy Shannon, who South Florida fans know from his days at Miami, both as a player as a coach. He is the interim head coach. What are his chances of moving up?
I think it's better than most think. But one of the things that's interesting about when Randy came to UCF is he and Josh Heupel were a package deal when they were hired after Scott Frost left. Randy would handle the defense, Josh would handle the offense, and be the head coach. And Randy has done a lot of recruiting, especially in South Florida, and he brought a lot of legitimacy also to after Scott Frost left and kind of stabilized things a little bit. Randy, I mean, you've known Randy for a long time, and we both remember when he was a player at Miami. Randy just loves to coach.
Very long time.
Yeah, and I think UCF. This is one of the good things about UCF is that this school gave him the opportunity to just be a coach and coach his players. He didn't really have to deal with the media very much, which you and I both know he's not really a fan of doing. And so he certainly could be an option going forward. I think one of the things that kind of hurts him is the fan base really isn't too happy with him because there was some major regression on the defense last year. They were one of the worst defenses in the country, and rightly or wrongly, he got some of the blame for it. I think it's a lot more complicated than that because of, like we said earlier, a lot of the personnel issues that we had due to COVID up here. But I don't think he should be discounted at all.
Out of that list of names, you had some sexy ones like Gus Malzahn. That was probably, if I remember correctly, the biggest. You had Lance Leopold at Buffalo, oddly enough, and a few others. Pick 3 or 4 that you think are truly realistic. Like if I gave you $5 and said, go to the window and bet on 4 names, who would you bet on?
Well, my first one would be Jeff Lebby, the offensive coordinator at Ole Miss. And the reason why I say that is because as I mentioned a little bit earlier yesterday, over the past 36 hours, a bunch of current and former players have come out on social media campaigning for him. Now, you can take that or leave it, but they're having their voice heard about how much they really like Jeff Lebby. Whether or not Lebby has had anything to do with that, I don't think so. But he really did enjoy his time here. He was the co-offensive coordinator under Josh Heupel, and the players really, really liked him a lot. So he would be one that I would look at. Lance Leipold in Buffalo, I think, is another one. Look at and we thought that he would be a candidate if Heupel left for somewhere else and Danny White was still around.
Hey, yep.
And also, to be honest with you, I thought that he was going to be a leading candidate for Tennessee because of Danny White. But Leipold, I think, would be an interesting option. One of the guys I really like, whose name has popped up and was in our article, was Tony Elliott, the offensive coordinator at Clemson. And especially, I don't know if Graham Neff, the associate AD at Clemson, would be one of the AD jobs, but it's one of those things where, that would make sense if there was a package deal with him and Tony Elliott coming on board to kind of stabilize things. Gus Malzahn, I'm not as high personally on Gus as others are. And the reason why is go back to the Peach Bowl when UCF finished their undefeated season on New Year's Day of 2018. That Auburn team did not look like they were ready for that game.
Yeah, I agree.
And now this is just my personal. I looked at that. I'm like, is that what you really want? You want to? UCF was absolutely 100% ready to take on Auburn. Tied their hair back and everything. They were ready to go. I don't think, and a lot of UCF fans will argue, well, hey, they said that they were giving it their all. I watched Kerryon Johnson in that game, and maybe Gus was trying to coach him up, but if I were him, I would have pulled Kerryon out of the game and said, listen, are you here to play or are you here to just preserve yourself for the NFL? Because if it's the latter, go sit down and I'll get someone in there who wants to play. And Kerryon ended up playing the whole game, and Auburn lost the game. It felt like the way that the Auburn players approached that game didn't reflect well on Gus. I don't know if that's fair or not. It probably isn't, actually, to be honest with you, because Gus is a good head coach. The results speak for themselves.
Well, the X's and O's part, yes.
Yeah.
2 names you didn't mention that were in your article that I'm really intrigued by: Jamie Chadwell at Coastal Carolina and Billy Napier at Louisiana. Now, I got to tell you, I'm shocked that Napier is still there. He has had tremendous success at Louisiana. He's put out not just like good teams for his conference. I mean, good teams, period.
Yeah.
And I would have thought Tennessee would have come calling. And I've got to suspect that he's interviewed for some of these jobs. I'm just not sure. This is a Nick Saban guy. So if he has any relationship with the Nick Tater at all, Saban has probably talked to people. And I would love to know what's holding him back at Louisiana. And Chadwell was everybody's charm this year. Coastal Carolina was a big team for a while and beating big bad BYU. So I'm surprised that those names aren't getting quite the run. And I don't know if they don't fit UCF, but I would think it's an upgrade for them as far as quality of play in the conference, I think. Yeah. So I'm a little surprised that we're not hearing more from them.
Well, I think we are hearing a little bit more as time sort of goes by. We like one of the things that we talked about when we were kind of, meeting together at Black and Gold Banneret, trying to figure out, okay, what's going to be our list here. Napier is like you said, a really interesting case. I do think that UCF would be foolish not to put him in the mix, considering what he's done with an extreme lack of resources at Louisiana. Let's just be honest. Like there's not much there, and that's one of the things that UCF that you have to be as both an AD and a coach is you have to be resourceful and creative, right? Because you can't just throw money at the problem. Jamie Chadwell, I know that he's on the front of mind because of Coastal Carolina, but one of the things that concerns me about Jamie, listen, he's a good coach, but when he was at Charleston Southern, they had some NCAA violations underneath him in 2014 and 2015 that really looked bad, and that's something that I know that even that going back to George O'Leary, who for all his faults ran a clean program at UCF. It was really it's something that I don't know if UCF wants to go in on quite just yet. For that very reason. Now I don't know if in actual practice that's holding him back. I do think he's a very good coach and he'll find a job probably somewhere else outside of Coastal Carolina sooner rather than later. It's just that's one of the things that for me looking at it is like that's a little bit of a red flag. Maybe we should look at some other candidates too.
It might be one of those things where the further in the rearview mirror that gets, the higher his percentage goes up of getting out of Coastal. Not that Coastal Carolina is a terrible place. It isn't at all.
No, it's Myrtle Beach, man. Why would you want to leave?
You're not that close to the beach. You're still about 20 minutes away, and the traffic there is kind of bad. But no, nonetheless, it's not a bad place. And actually, they have a kind of a cute little campus. I've been there a couple of times. All right, so now I'm going to put you on the spot, Jeff. You listed all your candidates at your website. Give me your choice for head coach. If you, Jeff Sharon, are making the pick, who do you pick for your next head football coach?
All right, you are putting me on the spot. I personally, if I was hired as the AD, would pick Jeff Lebby because okay. I know that number one, he's familiar with the program. Number two, I think he understands also because he went to Ole Miss. He understands some of the things that I think Josh Heupel could have improved upon. And number three, he keeps the brand going in terms of that hashtag UCF fast offense and hashtag UCF fierce defense. He'd be a hit with the players. He'd be a hit with the fans. He'd be a hit with the administration because you can fundraise pretty nicely with him. And he also gets the program and what you can do and what you can't do. So he would be my personal first choice. But like we said, just like with the AD job, UCF doesn't have to convince. They can select their coach.
Yeah,
because
their AD.
Yeah, it's universally known throughout the football world that this is a place where you can win and win quickly. And that's a very appealing prospect for a lot of the candidates out there.
Oh, that's very fair. Well, have you applied for the AD gig, Jeff? I mean,
no.
Who knows the program?
Listen, I got my master's in journalism from Syracuse, not in sports management from UCF. That's a whole different ballgame, man. That's way above my pay grade.
All right. Well, Jeff, it's great talking to you. I've always your passion for UCF is obvious. You can follow Jeff on Twitter and just talk a little bit about your website, if you will, and the people want to follow UCF. How can they do it?
Sure. Hop over to blackandgoldbanneret.com. You can see it on the crawl on the bottom. We are SB Nation's UCF site. I actually started the site myself 5 years ago, and we moved over to SB Nation a couple years ago, and it's been great ever since. We have a podcast and a staff of everyone that covers UCF sports all throughout, not just the big sports, football and basketball, but really all sports. And we really pride ourselves on that. And there's a lot of UCF grads in South Florida. Aside from Central Florida, South Florida is where the highest concentration of UCF graduates are. So make sure you follow us there. And we're on Twitter at UCF_Banneret, UCF_Banneret, and Facebook.com/Black and Gold Banneret as well. And Dave, it's a privilege to be on your show for the first time. You've been one of my heroes for a long time.
Yeah, thank you.
Not to make you feel old or anything, but you know, but no, listen. Yeah, no. But hey, thank you so much for having me on, and I'm hoping that we can have you back up in Orlando at the Bounce House to do some games, and you know, who knows, maybe Anderson will sack himself one more time.
Yeah, that would be nice. At least it worked out very well for you, Jeff. It was a pleasure. Thank you for finding the time, and good luck with everything with the website and with the searches. And hopefully UCF can get to where it was again. Not that 6-4 is bad in a tough year, but thank you for your time. I appreciate it, buddy.
It should be a lot of fun. Thank you, Dave. Good talking to you. Take care.
Good talking to you too. Before I wrap things up today, just a local radio note that I wanted to mention, and the passing of Bill Tanner in South Florida. Bill Tanner was a giant in radio just as I was breaking in. And as Jeff mentioned, not to make me feel old, but we're talking about the late 1970s. I broke in at a station called 96X. It was a top 40 / rock station. And Y100 was the competing station, and they were pretty much the same format, maybe a little more pop, because we would play Skinner and The Who, and in addition to Donna Summer, and we played whatever was hot. That was the way. Top 40 radio was a lot different than it is now. And we were chasing Y100's morning show, and we went through a few morning shows in our own right. And in fact, it got so bad, and this is the truth, that when I got there, 96X was in the middle of a cheating scandal because they were paying people to mark up the ratings books. You literally got a book from the ratings companies, and you would mark the times that you would listen. And they were paying people who had books to say they were listening to 96X. Down the road, that cost the station their license. There is no more 96X. And one of the things, we were chasing after Bill Tanner and Footy and that morning show that he put together. He was a significant talent. He went on to mentor a lot of people in this area who have also gone on and had great success, and was a program director for a while too. He passed away in Birmingham, Alabama a couple of days ago in hospice. Certainly thoughts with the Tanner family and all his friends in South Florida radio. He really had a great talent for communicating, and it made him one of the best this town has ever seen. My thanks again to Jeff Sharon from blackandgoldbanneret.com, and thanks to all of you. We'll talk to you Monday on the Nooner. One technical issue. You may have noticed if you happen to go to the YouTube channel that I haven't been able to post videos. Since I created the new page, I haven't been able to download them. I'm working on it. You're talking to a guy who has computers at about a second grade level. If I turned it over to a 12-year-old middle schooler, he or she would have it up in probably about 2 minutes. So I just, need to go back to the high school I work at and ask a student for some help, because they are the ones who understand how to fix this stuff, not, as Jeff said, old guys like me. Thanks for watching. Have a great weekend. Wear a mask, and we'll talk to you Monday.